Hello, Canadian teen book lovers. I'm just started week 26 today, which means yesterday I finished week 25, and I am 9 days away from my halfway point, if you can believe that, and that will be 184 books. So slowly but surely, I'm making my way across the country. Uh, this is kind of a combination of weeks 23 to 25. The last book chat I filmed was with Kevin Sylvester, and I hope you all watched it because it was so much fun. But this week I'm going through a stack of books just to get them all done. I'm on summer schedule now. So, first up, I have This One Summer by Mariko Tamaki and her cousin Jillian Tamaki. I hope I'm saying that right. It's a graphic novel, so it was a pretty quick read, even though it's over 300 pages. But it's the story about two friends who are up at their cottages for the summer in Canada, and they're never really says their age, but they seem to be preteens who are, coming into themselves and realizing what's ahead for them in the future. So there's a storyline about a local girl getting pregnant, and there's stuff with the main character's mother around pregnancy and miscarriages and things like that. And it's just an insightful read, a bit nostalgic, and I think it works for teens and adults. But if it's just a simple read, then it's good for younger teens. Next up, we have Paul Yee's What Happened This Summer. This is a collection of short stories about the Chinese-Canadian community, and it's very insightful. I learned so much, and it made me really want to read more of Paul Yee's work. Plus, it's set in Toronto, and it opened up a new aspect to the city for me. So, again, I really enjoyed it. This is going back, I think, a couple of weeks, but Nothing Man in the Purple Zero by Richard Scarisbrick. Wow, this was so much fun. I laughed so hard. I wrote in my review that I hadn't laughed that hard since I read a Vicki Grant book. It's about these two best friends who end up dressing up in Marty's grandfather's old outfits, and then they go out for a drive in one of his fancy cars, and when they do that, they end up foiling a robbery completely by accident, but somebody sees it and is filming it and kind of alters the film so it looks like they're superheroes, and that it was totally planned that they were going to stop the robbers in their tracks and fight crime. So, and it's just so interesting because it kind of explodes on YouTube, and then people start believing in superheroes, and it inspires them to do different things, and it's just, I loved it because at the core, the message is that anyone can be a superhero, and that being a superhero means so many different things. So it was just great and so funny. Up next, one of my top 5 favorites. I know that's probably going to change as I keep reading, but this is my second time reading it, and the first time I read it, it was on my top 5 list, and it's definitely staying there. It's about Sandy, whose father dies, and she's dealing with the grief of losing. He was kind of like her best friend, although she has a best friend. But she's dealing with the loss of her father, and she's just overwhelmed by grief. And it's about how she comes through it and gets herself to the other side. But it's also about mother-daughter relationships, because it's about how she finds a new way to communicate with her mother, because they were never that close, but now they have to be closer because she's the only parent left. And then it's about her friend Lenny and her mother, and the secrets that are in their family history, and how they all deal with that. It's a character-driven book, and it's so beautifully written. It's just lyrical. It's Gillian Cummings. Wow, she's an amazing writer. Next up, Mosh Pit by Kristen Dunyan. I was surprised. I wasn't really expecting to like this book, but I did. It's about people who like punk music, and it's a whole different lifestyle, and it just opened me up to a different world. And the main character, Simone, is, again, it's about a best friend relationship. Her friend quit school and is kind of heading in a bad direction, and Simone has to figure out if she's going to follow her best friend down this path that isn't a good path to be on, or whether she's going to stand up for herself and decide that yes, she deserves love and she deserves to have the life she wants to live. And that's why I really liked it. And plus, it's a good book if you're looking for diverse YA. Next up, TT Full Throttle by Nicole Winters. Nicole actually just went to, it all takes place on the Isle of Man, and every year they have a tourist trophy race. And so this year, Nicole Winters was actually there. She's been there in the past because she did a lot of research for this book, but she was there again because she's writing another book. And it's, again, a new perspective, because I personally had no experience with racing. So reading about it, I really liked Nicole Winters, her detail of the story. She really put me in the action with Scott, and made me feel like I was the one racing through reading her book. It was just incredible that way. Something I will never experience, I got to experience through her book. Next up is Scars by Cheryl Rainfield. I've read her before. I read Hunted a couple of years ago, I guess now. But I hadn't read any of her other books, and I really liked Hunted because Cheryl, she's good at depth with characters. And so even though Hunted was like a sci-fi type book, she still had believable characters in a pretty remarkable situation. And I liked that she made it relatable, even though the situation itself was so unrelatable. Scars is more true to life, realistic fiction. It's about this girl who has been abused in the past, and she's going to therapy for it, but sometimes the pain of memory is just too much and she cuts herself. But the book is about how she figures out who was who her abuser was, and also she figures out that not all physical relationships have to be bad, because she finds someone that she can love and be safe with and be supported by, and it just changes things for her. So it's really well written. I have a lot of respect for Cheryl as a writer. This Dark Endeavor. Megan from the library, from the book center, has been telling me repeatedly how good this book is and how I need to read it, and wow, she was right. It was so good. And I say that I mean, I'm not a horror fan, and I would say it's got edges of horror because, of course, it's the prequel to Frankenstein. So it's about Dr. Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, growing up as a teenager. So it does have its elements of horror and some parts, oh man, it just turned my stomach into knots. But it goes so far to explaining Frankenstein, and I just loved where Kenneth Opel's mind was going to give this character motivation for the atrocities that he commits in other books. It really sets things up nicely, and I can't wait to read Such Wicked Intent, even though I don't have the time. That's the only problem with reading the first in the series. If you like the series, you want to read the next one, but right now I have to ease up and wait, which is unfortunate because I would love to read it. I can't wait to see what happens next. Next two books, I have kind of, sometimes in reading, when I'm reading, I have periods where the books are pretty similar. This past week, I had 4 books that were about religion. So one was Wanting More, and it was about Islamic religion, and it was very insightful. I learned a lot, and I enjoyed learning it. I don't have it here because it was actually on my e-reader. But I also had The Waiting Tree, which, if you know anything about Christianity, Lindsay Moynihan must have done her research because she names all 4 of the brothers after apostles of Jesus. And she's specific. She picks her names wisely, and they mean something about the character. And that's what I really enjoyed about this book, because there's this whole nother layer going on, and you have to, like, you could read it and you would be fine if you didn't know about the other layer, but the other layer just adds so much depth and content to the book that I really enjoyed realizing that there was another layer. If you don't know a lot about the apostles, you can read my review because I went through and listed what she was actually talking about. So it was a great book, and I love the characters, especially Jude, because he ends up being such a surprise, but also Simon, because he's constantly there for his family, even when it means personal sacrifice on his part. So it was very good. It was also on the White Pine list last year. Last but not least, Virginia by Susan Hughes. Okay. It's an odd book. There's no way of getting around that. It's about this girl who believes the angel Gabriel is visiting her and has told her that she's going to have God's baby. So it turns out that her brother Paul has kind of started his own extremist religion. He has his own ideas about bringing about the apocalypse. And Virginia is kind of soaking this all in, and it seems like her vision of the angel is her way of coping. Like, she feels she has to do something to stop her brother, and maybe having a child that's from God will distract him and make him realize that things aren't as bad as they seem. It's unclear whether she's being abused by him or not. Hughes kind of hints at it at times, but never comes right out and says it, so I'm not sure. But Virginia tells her friend Ivy that she's going to have a baby, and it's about how Ivy takes it in skeptically and then tries to figure out what's really going on and finds out about Paul and what Virginia heard, and but is also dealing with her own stuff because her mother is an alcoholic. So it was completely surprising because I loved it, even though it was so unreal. But I liked it because it made me think about things that are real and things that are not, and the difference between faith and myth and faith and madness. Sometimes it's a fine line, and Susan Hughes really captures that in her book. This is my last week of reading in Toronto, which took a long time. And then for my midway point, the 3 days of midway, I'm going to be reading all the Thunder Bay books because it's a nod to Terry Fox. Thunder Bay isn't exactly halfway through the country, but it's kind of acknowledged to be, and that's where Terry Fox had to end his Marathon of Hope. So that's why I'm reading the Thunder Bay books, because I'm kind of jumping from Toronto to Thunder Bay. That's a long way. Then I'll go back and go down into the southern part of Ontario and keep going. So yeah, my stats are, I've read 175 books now. That's 39,359 pages, which is 3,935.9 kilometers across Canada, which means I'm actually pretty close to being halfway across the country, which is awesome. Hours of reading, 495 hours and 33 minutes. So, yeah, I'm on my way, and I'm still going. And I hope everyone has a great week, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.